Welcome to Choose the Nickel. I'm your host, George Bailey. My co-founder and technical support is the gorgeous Christina Bailey. This podcast is about giving kids financial freedom. We're interviewing fascinating people for their insights about how children learn to be financially savvy. Our guests come from diverse, sometimes conflicting schools of thought, and we love the opportunity to learn from them. We encourage all to weigh our guests' ideas on how to help children thrive, both financially and in general. We invite you to visit our website at www.choosethenickel.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and try out the things we are learning on the podcast. Our next episode features Steve Max, the nation's leading Simon Sez caller. Taking the classic children's game to new heights, Steve's hilarious and interactive show is seen nationally at hundreds of NBA, WNBA, and college basketball, football, and ice hockey halftime shows. Steve has made multiple TV appearances ranging from The Ultimate Defender, which aired on ESPN during the latest Super Bowl weekend, to playing Simon Sez with Regis Philbin on the Hallmark Channel's Home and Family TV show. Steve teaches great lessons on the importance of listening and teamwork. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Max. Mr. Steve Max, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, George. Great to be here.
Now, I have to say, a couple months ago, I watched you perform. I was at a St. Louis University women's basketball team with my sons on a field trip, and they loved you, and I loved you. I thought, like, oh my gosh, like, I did not expect what I got. Tell me a little bit about what I got.
I'm glad you enjoyed. That's my optimal goal, is to make sure that people enjoy what I do. Otherwise, what's the point? You know, I feel blessed that I'm able to have a job that allows me to make people smile. Because if that ain't the best job in the world, I don't know what is. So what did you get? You got a taste of Steve Max's Halftime Simon Sez Challenge. It's a show that's 14 years in the making. I did my first halftime show in the summer of '03 for the New York Liberty, which is the women's professional basketball. And over the years, I've just been refining it and sort of through trial and error, just see what works best with any given crowd. And actually what you saw that day, it was a matinee game, as you recall. The majority of basketball halftime shows are in the evening. But I have found that there is a niche in the college basketball marketplace where they bring in local schools. And I like to incorporate the listening message in that show. Even though it's not a school show, I feel like I almost have an obligation to incorporate the message just briefly, because we're there to have fun. And the truth is, they usually only give me 6 to 8 minutes to do my thing. But I like to incorporate that into my show so that when the kids walk out, not only do they laugh and have a good time with my show and the silliness of the Simon Sez, but maybe there's some lingering thoughts about maybe taking the listening skills back home or to school and how it can help them in their daily lives.
I really appreciate that you've given it a deeper thought. And I remember when you said that, it didn't just go by me without being caught. You know, I thought like, oh, he's actually, he wants to teach the kids something about the importance of being able to follow instructions and being able to listen very carefully. I like good listening. I really like kids who listen. Let me tell you that. So now what's interesting to me is that you've turned what most people think of as just a game for kids into enjoyable entertainment for all. And I mean all. What motivated you to start Steve Max? When was it evident that you were onto something?
I think as a kid, I really enjoyed making people laugh, making people smile, even around the dinner table when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. And it always seemed like when we sat down, my goal was to make my family members laugh over dinner. And then I got into magic a few years later. And when I was 15 years old, I just had this urge to go out and try and be an entertainer. So I started doing magic shows at birthday parties. My grandma took me into New York City and I bought about a dozen magic tricks and I learned them and I put them cohesively into a magic show from beginning to end. And I incorporated some juggling in there as well and some balancing. I would balance stuff on my face. I started doing birthday parties. And I remember I was too young to drive, so my dad would drop me off at the gig and either hang out in the car or go do errands and come get me in an hour. From that point on, it was something I needed to do. I remember when I was through college, I would do, on the weekends, 1 or 2 shows on the weekends. But of course, my education was my foremost priority. So it was more just of a weekend thing. I make a few bucks on the weekend doing a birthday or a first Holy Communion or perhaps a Cub Scout blue and gold dinner in April and May. So I would say when I was 15 years old, Steve Max became an entertainer.
It's so funny because I feel like I've seen you before. I've seen you in the kids that I know who grew up juggling and doing all those things. And I always thought that was super cool. I don't consider myself to be very coordinated. I would lose your game in a heartbeat. And for those of my listeners who have not really seen it, I would urge you to go on Steve Max's website, which I'm going to put in the show notes, and just check it out because this guy's over the top. It's awesome. Now, actually, in one of the video clips that you have on your website, you're in front of Regis and his whole crew. So as you were trying to get people to follow instructions, one of the things you did was that you did one thing with your body while you told them to do something else. Like, I just thought, like, okay, that's brutal. Like, this guy really does, like, the sneaky tactics. Like, how is that ethical in the world of Simon Sez?
It's right there in the title. The game is do what Simon says, not what Simon does. Especially in a basketball halftime show where I'm only have such a short amount of time and I have 50, 60, 70 people sometimes. And I tell the people that I'm dealing with, I need this many participants on the court. In order for me to do my show, have a little bit of fun, and be off the court in time before the players come out. But inevitably, they go out and they'll go up to a sibling, and then the other sibling want to play. And then the father's like, oh, and before you know it, I got 80, 90 people, but they still only give me the same 6 to 8 minutes. So sometimes, as you say, you have to be a little brutal. You have to pull out, all the stops. You have to go to the second shelf of trickery to get people out.
Darwinism at its finest right there, man. So you just got to eliminate.
And what you find out is people will not wait for you to finish a sentence. They see you touching your head, boom, they go to the head. And I say, Simon says, touch your hips. But if my hands are on my head, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to wait. So then what I do is I take that particular moment and I incorporate that into my school show. And that turns into an object of respect. When you let someone finish a sentence without interrupting, without doing or saying something, just sit there, ears are open, you're looking them in the eyeballs, being a respectful person. You let them finish. If you do that simple task, you're not going to make the mistake of touching your hips. You're going to let them finish their sentence, and then you're going to touch your head and do what's proper. So that's the way I take all the themes of Simon Sez and I incorporate that into an educational character ed show that I do at assembly programs throughout the New York tri-state area. It's bananas. The faculty loves it almost more than the kids because, teaching is such a difficult job in and of itself. And I come through the doors, and a lot of times assembly programs are like a talking head, or they're hitting you over the head with this message, but it's not necessarily fun. So I take the framework of Simon Sez, and we play Simon Sez, but along the way I incorporate messages of a character education nature about respect, making good choices. Don't worry what they think about you. Worry about what you think about you. That's self-respect, on and on and on. I have to say it's my favorite show to do. I get the most out of it.
What you're saying resonates with me so thoroughly. And I'm thinking right now, of just interactions that I've had with my children in the last week where I will call them in. I want them to listen. I have some instructions for them. I give them the first instruction and bam, they're gone. They're gone. And I just think like, no, that's not how it's done. Mr. Max, come save me. You know, like it really feels that way where this is a lesson that I really want my children to learn. And, you know, it's not as if I wasn't guilty myself. Like I read every little instruction before I took the test. No, not at all. I think that that's a great skill to build early on. I love what you're saying. Now, when I was watching what you were doing in St. Louis, I noticed that same message. I love it. I love the deeper principle that you're bringing with it. You were a kid once. Where did you grow up?
I was a kid once, and you know what? I think I'm still a kid at heart.
Yes.
You know, I grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey. That's in the northern part of the state. You know, I was just a regular kid. Went to the public schools there, you know, 2 elementary schools, because we moved when our family got a little bit bigger and we outgrew our Cape Cod, and we moved to a colonial on the other side of town. So I had to meet a new set of friends on the other side and did all the things that kids do. I played Little League baseball. I loved, we lived down the street from the high school where there were tennis courts. So I loved playing tennis. I loved playing youth basketball. You know, I was just a regular kid. And I had my cronies who, you know, I befriended, who were also people who liked being in the limelight a little bit. You know, I did musicals in high school, but I wasn't necessarily in front of the curtain. I was in the orchestra pit because I also played drums. So that's where I grew up, you know, and that's where I started doing my entertaining as a kid.
You mentioned baseball, tennis. What were your favorite games? And I would like to hear both what your favorite games were athletically, because it seems like you're athletically inclined, and also in terms of board games, you know, chess, checkers, that type.
As a kid, Sundays at my home, we would sit around the fireplace. We would play perhaps checkers or backgammon.
I don't get backgammon at all. Sorry, I just don't. I know later on, if I were a good person, I would go and I would look up the rules and I would figure it out. You're one of the few people I know who gets that game.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, you know, we didn't really have video games back in the day when I was a kid, except maybe Pong. I remember when Pong came out, you know, just 2 paddles and a little ball going back and forth. And it was so elementary and basic. Perhaps that's a good thing, because it forced me to interact with other people and be outside and, you know, have a catch with my dad. You know, I always get choked up when I watch A Field of Dreams, you know, at the very last scene. And I remember when my wife and I were looking for a home, the one thing I wanted more than anything else was a home with a big backyard, so that when I had kids one day, I could have a catch with them in the backyard. To this day, I still love playing tennis. I still love playing basketball, although I always end up hurting myself. So my wife has nixed me. She says that basketball is verboten. No more basketball from me, because my knees always tend to, and I got to get to the gig, so I can't really be hurting myself.
Oh, wow. So, you know, I like what you're saying about kind of the emotional tie that many of us feel for the games. What would you say about that emotional tie in terms of how healthy that is for children?
I guess I don't need to tell you that, you know, obesity is trending upwards in our country. My wife, for the past 6 years, has been working with an initiative at Tufts University in Boston called Child Obesity 180. And they're trying to reverse the trend. And I have heard so many statistics over the years about, here's just a simple one. Obesity in children has tripled since the 70s. So if that doesn't say something about how kids play these days and how sitting in front of a screen as opposed to being outside and running around has affected our youth, you know, then I don't know what does. When you have a game like Simon Sez, where you can get the kids up and moving about. In fact, I've been sought after by a few communities, like Austin had an initiative. Austin, Texas had an initiative called Let's Move Austin. And the mayor's wife was in charge of that. She flew me out there. And on a Saturday morning in front of the river, there was a couple thousand people. And I did my Simon Sez show, but I incorporated a lot of aerobics into the show. So I took my framework of my show, but we were doing push-ups. We were doing jumping jacks. We were doing deep bends, incorporating all that stuff. And I turned my show, and you can see it. I actually have it. I thought it was so important. I put an additional page on my website at stevemax.com specifically for that, so that people know that you can hire me not just for fun, but let's make something important happen during my show.
And I would definitely encourage listeners, again, go to the show notes. We're going to include all of this because I'm eating this up, man. I think I'm very encouraged that your wife is doing that for Tufts University. I think that is a wonderful effort. And I have to say that even for adults, we have to get up. I have a very sedentary job. Sometimes I drive around a lot. I work at a desk. I find myself taking breaks, standing up, walking around, doing push-ups just to, kind of rejuvenate that energy. And that's something that you can start early in life. Give kids a sense of the importance of movement.
It's real important. I think 25% of children are obese and a third of adults are obese. Thankfully, you see schools now, because of the schools that my wife's initiative have reached out to, they're incorporating more movement into their weekly schedule. You also see corporations having weeks where they do something athletically, and every morning they'll meet at a certain area. I've done some companies, some pharma companies, where they would do once a month, they would meet and they would do something special just to get people moving. I know that Mrs. Obama had the Let's Move program that she was instituting around the country. And it's a very important thing. And I'm very happy that one of the great things about Simon Sez, yes, it's fun. And yes, we make people laugh, but I use it as a framework. And within that framework, I can include so many messages. If it's a corporate sales meeting and they want to get a point across, I can include that within the framework. If it's a school and I'm talking about the 6 pillars of character, making good choices, I can include that in the show. And if they're looking to move around and do some aerobic exercises, I can include that in my show as well. So it's a multi-purpose platform.
So going back to the games, when we look at the advances of games through the years, which advances have you really enjoyed seeing?
That's a really good question. I would say hand-eye coordination is important. It's an important skill set. In fact, I've seen it implemented in special needs children, where maybe they're sort of slow out of the box, or they're because of their learning, because they're a little behind, because it takes them longer to do things that mainstream kids can do. A lot of the technology is helping them, I think, and just across the board. When you can play, let's say, a video game, or you've seen these games where the kids dance.
Yeah,
like Dance, whatever.
Dance Revolution. My wife actually really wants to get something like that. We're not a video game family. I would not be opposed to some dancing in my home. We actually do dance parties anyhow. Every once in a while, we have like a weekly family home evening where, we have our just some activity with the kids. So it's like us and our kids, and we're doing stuff, and we will do dance parties. I'll turn on the music, turn it up loud, and be like, okay, kids, jam out, but if it's a video game doing that, I actually welcome that too.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I don't know if your followers know, we're Skyping right now, so I can see you. And from what I see, you have disco written all over you. So I can only imagine.
That is the first time I've been told that, buddy.
But I have to say, if you make good choices in terms of the technology that has happened over the years is amazing. From, I mentioned Pong earlier. So to go from Pong to what is available out there now. And if you make good choices and you do the Dance Revolution, if you do games that, really get your mind barking and your eyes darting and your hands moving, I think technology is wonderful. Now, having said that, we're also at a point where all you do is see people staring at screens. I have a friend who calls it a head down society, and that's what we've become. And is there anything more sad than going into a restaurant and seeing a family of 4 next to you. And it's not just the kids, it's the parents, and they're all on their phones and they're all looking at their phones. And there's no interaction going on. To me, personally, I'll just say personally, to me, it's very sad, because then the kids are going to grow up and they're going to do the same thing with their kids. So you have technology, great, but you have to make the good choices.
My wife and I have a rule that when we sit down at the dinner table, our phones are out of sight. And I think that is important to have that family time during dinner or whenever it is where your kids can trust that they have your full attention and your interest.
Yeah, I'm no expert. I don't have a doctorate in anything, but I would be really interested to see the statistics when they come back 10 years from now, 20 years from now, to see, is the iPhone the greatest thing ever? I think maybe it might very well be, but in doses. It's great so you can find where you're going. It's great as a tool if you need to speak to someone for emergencies, it's great. But it's also become a big social thing. It's just incredibly overused. The number of traffic accidents that has gone up because of it, the lives lost because people are on their phones and making poor choices. I just hope that there's a trend, just like my wife worked, trying to reverse the trend of obesity. I hope that there are organizations out there that are trying to reverse the trend of, how people interact with their phones.
I agree. Now, you mentioned that you're not terribly fond of video games. Are there any other games outside of video games that you're not a fan of?
Games that I'm not listen, everyone, it's like going to a movie and one person loves it, one person hates it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that one game is, I think, games it's a very personal choice. People play games, they're either a fan of it or they're not. If a person enjoys a game and and they're not hurting themselves and they're not hurting other people, then, who am I to say it's a bad game?
So I agree. George, we all have our taste.
George, I'm not going down that.
You don't want to alienate Milton Bradley or anything like that. I get it.
Absolutely.
You're smart.
Not.
That's
Plus,
good.
I play a game for my job, so I don't want to.
So it's going to be like, hey, Mr. Simon Sez, you have no business saying that, buddy. No, Simon Sez is cool, and you've converted me. So now, in regards to games, are there any games that you think are great for teaching kids about money and business in a fun way?
Well, I don't know. Maybe Monopoly. That's all about.
Absolutely.
Well, here's something. It's important to be an ethical person. One of the 6 pillars of character that I talk about in my show is fairness. A lot of times schools will bring me in during their June field day, right? That's when it's games all day long. They're outside playing games. And I talk about that Simon Sez is a game, and games need to be fair. If the game is not fair, if you have an advantage over someone, if you're cheating in some way, then you're not being a respectful person. It all comes back to respect. The 6 pillars, trustworthiness, responsibility, citizenship, caring, fairness. It all goes back to respect, I feel. So in some ways, if you're an ethical person, if you play fairly, then hopefully that will convert to a good business sense later on in life. I think the reason I am so successful with my one-man operation here that I've been doing I've been an entertainer for over 40 years. I started doing, I'm 56 now. I started when I was 15. So I've been an entertainer for over 40 years, a quarter of a century, doing my Simon Sez, and the past 14 seasons doing the basketball halftime shows.
I'm not trying to flatter you here, but you do not look like you're 56. I'm very surprised. You look like you're in great shape, and I that's not a suck up. I'm a little bit stunned, but go ahead.
Well, I appreciate that. And seeing you on the Skype, you look young and youthful yourself. You look as though your skin still snaps back. I'm impressed as well. I have a lot of repeat customers. In the business world, a repeat customer means you're doing something right. If you do not get a call back from someone that you think you did you don't have to think much further. The answer is that they were not impressed with the product that you provided them. So the fact that I do 60 to 70 half times a season and over half of them are repeat customers. St. Louis, the Billikens, repeat customers.
That's good.
Florida State, UConn. I could go on and on and on. And I apologize to the schools that I just did not mention. Those are just off the top of my head. But actually here's a little thing that a friend of mine told me I should do. They said, you should don't just list your customers on your website, have an interactive map on your website. So that's what I have on my halftime page. There's an interactive map. And if you click on a state, you can see all the customers who have used me. And there's a little asterisk if it's a repeat customer. And if I had $1 for every repeat customer, I'd be a wealthy man, And so I think going back to the original question, in terms of games, yes, Monopoly can teach you about, how to count $100 bills. But if games require honesty and integrity and help you interact with others on a one-to-one basis, so perhaps a game where you actually have to interact with other people and learn about other people and see where they're coming from, then that's going to help you down the road in whatever business endeavors you may have.
Which also brings up an interesting point about video games. And I won't lie, I was a video game addict, and I really mean that. As a kid, I was fortunate in that I was not able to bring my Nintendo to school when I went to study at BYU. Very grateful for that, because I think that weaned me from it. But that was a lot of independent time. That was not a time of maturing, because I was in front of a screen alone. And there's something to be said about even your board games. It doesn't have to be baseball or tennis. When you're interacting, there's a lot of power there.
There sure is. And that brings up something else, talking about technology. And by the way, Brigham Young has never brought me in. Thank you very much.
What? Okay, no, we're changing that, buddy. I've got.
So if you know someone over there,
I do. Yeah, I know. Okay, so this will probably be released in a few months. When it is, I know I've got some BYU people listening to this, and I'm telling you, good heavens, BYU, I love my alma mater so much. Please invite this man, okay?
Yeah, I do the jazz. I come in, I do the jazz, so if I'm in town, why don't you save a little money on air travel? I was going to say that socializing, so now with Facebook, with all of the social platforms that are out there, that's another great way to reach people if you want to be a successful business person. For example, I go on LinkedIn and I friend people that I know are in positions of hiring at basketball arenas and sporting events around the country. Whenever I'm on Facebook, I'm always posting pictures of someplace where I've been, because you never know who's going to be out there and who's going to see it. Something great that has happened recently, also incorporating technology, the NBA has started streaming their NBA halftime shows, which is something that they just started doing 2 seasons ago. So if you have the NBA package, so like all access NBA, and you're one of these people who loves watching, professional basketball, you can now see the halftime shows sitting in your own living room. Whereas before this, you had to be at the arena to see it. So what that does, that opens up my audience from 20,000 people at let's say, Utah Jazz game to millions of people around the world. I did recently a Clippers-Lakers game. And when I got back to my dressing room, and this is the amazing thing of technology, when I got back to my dressing room, moments later, I had 4 emails waiting for me, all of whom they saw me because of technology. And because of technology, they were able to find my website and email me. One was for a corporate outing. One was for a wedding in Ohio. One was for a birthday party in Quebec. It was amazing. And one was for a bar mitzvah in Beverly Hills, California.
Yeah.
Games that teach human interaction, or that require human interaction when you're playing it, so that you can learn about dealing with other people on a one-to-one basis and sort of get a feel for where the other people are coming from, and socializing with them. I think that can only help you moving forward down the road in terms of any business endeavors that you may have.
One last question about your childhood. Do you have any particularly important memories about things that your parents taught you about being an adult in the professional world? I noticed that your dad gave you rides to work at these gigs when you were 15. Any other explicit lessons that they taught you about money, business?
Well, I'll give you a few. First of all, my dad, for almost his entire life, worked as a tomato wholesaler. He was in the produce business. And I saw first of all, how hard he worked, how he would go into work 6 days a week. For me to see that, I knew that I wanted to be my own boss and try and be successful like my dad. Now, we were not well off. We were middle class at best, but he was able to send 4 children to college, and take care of our family. And we took family vacations during the summertime. But I saw how hard he worked, and I knew how hard he worked to make a buck, to take care of his family. So number one, that sticks in the back of my head. And I remember, going into work with him every once in a while and sorting tomatoes and, knowing the value of, getting your hands dirty and really working hard. I remember when I was in college, I flunked a course. And I remember my mom saying, "You're going to pay us back for that." And that was it caught me off guard. But when a parent says you're not focused enough in school, you're distracted or whatnot, you have to, and boy, oh boy, will that focus you when your parent says you're going to have to, Now, I guess the good thing was back in the day, I went to a state school in New Jersey. I went to Montclair State College, and my entire tuition for the semester was $4,000 compared to today where state schools are, if you're in state, they give you a good price. But, schooling is like a quarter $250,000 now to send your kid to a 4-year school.
I'm like, $4,000, huh? That would have paid for my books, It's not that bad, but whatever.
So that was a nice lesson that my parents taught me, so that stands out. My dad standing out. I remember when I wanted to get a mini bike when I was a kid. There was a mini bike that I would pass. It was at a local gas station. There was a for sale sign on it. And boy, did I want that little mini bike desperately. And my parents wouldn't let me get it. They said, you're throwing away your money. Save your money for something important, not a mini bike.
Do you have any advice for today's parents?
Today's parents. Yeah, I would say let your children fly. Let your children realize their dreams. I don't have a leg to stand on because I'm a Simon Sez guy. I could not be more thankful that my parents and my siblings' parents let us do what we wanted to do, to follow our dreams. I have a sister who's a lawyer. I have a younger brother who's in the money market business. I have another brother who's an artist. And even with my own 2 kids, they're terribly different. I mean, they both have great senses of humor, and they get that from me. But my older son went to the University of Pennsylvania. He was the one who could do his homework with one eyeball and watch Netflix with the other eyeball. And I'm talking about trigonometry and really hard stuff. So he's like my wife, smart, focused. He ended up getting a degree in computer science engineering from an Ivy League school. And he went out to San Francisco, got an internship after his junior year, and they hired him a year in advance. They said, "Come work for us after you graduate." And that's the type of kid he is, analytical and doing very well for himself. And then there's the younger guy who is 19 years old. When he was in 10th grade, he thought he was going to be a movie director. And then in 11th grade, he moved over to being a musician. He wanted to be a musician. And, initially you roll your eyeballs. You're like, oh, my goodness, being a musician is one of the most difficult things in the world. How many musicians are out there working on street corners, working in subways for just a few bucks here and a few bucks there? How do you know? But I'm a Simon Sez guy. And my parents let me do what I wanted. And me and my wife said, you know what? We're going to let Jacob do what he wants to do. We started looking at music schools around the country. And the most difficult one to get into is the Berklee College of Music in Boston. Many schools will take you, but then you have to audition to see what department they're going to put you in. Berklee, you don't get through the front doors unless you pass their audition. And son of a gun, he went there. He was playing piano initially. He changed his mind. He turned into a drummer. And we just thought, oh, there's no way he's getting in. But you know what? He got in. And now he's in the middle of his junior year, sophomore year rather, second year at Berklee. And he's having the time of his life. We're happy for him. We're ecstatic. It's very exciting to see where he's going to be in 5 years and 10 years down the road.
I love hearing that. I'm thinking right now of my wife's parents who have shown incredible support for each of their children in the directions that they've wanted to go. Their youngest son, second to youngest child, decided, hey, I'm going to be a choral conductor, which is, again, it's one of those where you think like, well, where's the money in that? But he was so smart about how he approached it, and they supported him the whole way. And now, he has a higher degree in that, and he's actually, teaching choral conducting, and he's traveling, and he is getting known by, some pretty big names and shaking things up. And he's got incredible talent. Don't squelch that talent. Same thing with your son, learning the drums. Oh my gosh, what an instrument. What skill. I've seen some pretty incredible drummers, and to get into Berklee, no easy task. Now, if I could ask you one last question, what is your very favorite charitable cause?
I have a charity that is very near and dear to me, and it came about through my performing. There is a summer camp, and I've been doing summer camps for the better part of a quarter of a century. And I'm a tradition at so many camps, throughout New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. So much so that I can be at Stanford University and there's a kid in the pep band going, Steve Max, Steve Max. And he starts screaming out the name of their, or I'll do local arenas at Madison Square Garden. And you just see them. They're like running down the aisles like ants. Steve Max, all screaming out the summer camp, So there's a camp called Camp Simcha. And it's upstate New York, and it's for kids with cancer. And when I started going there, I would take $100 off my price because I said, these people are doing good work. But as I drove out of the place, I'd be like, why am I even charging these people? But you know what? I just started out, and my summer really wasn't filled up, and I just didn't feel like I could give away an evening's worth of entertainment for nothing. So my schedule fills up. And by the way, let me just go back. You said about your wife's parents. So my in-laws, when I asked for my wife's hand in marriage, when I asked for their blessing, my father-in-law looks me in the eyeballs. He says, how are you going to support the wife, my daughter? And I said, I'm going to be an entertainer. Yeah. And he's like, okay, do you have a plan B? Do you have a plan B? And he was so serious. And I said, well, I graduated from, Montclair State College with a degree in broadcasting communications. And if need be, I could, get a job in production, television production, radio production. I know how to edit video and audio. And I could start out as a gaffer or, but then a few years later, I was doing 400, 500 shows a year. He said, well, don't worry about plan B anymore. And so that was very gratifying. So it's nice to have parents and, in that case, grandparents who allow you to follow your dreams. Okay. I'm at Camp Simcha. I have, my schedule fills up during the summertime. And I say to myself, next summer, when they call me, no charge. I'm not going to charge them. And I was going up twice a season. I'm going to say, you know what? Both shows, my pleasure, my honor. You're doing fabulous work. So I go up there. A counselor comes up to me, shows me a picture of a kid that I incorporated in my show the previous year. And he said, you made his stay. My goodness, he was about 9. All the kids in the bunk were so happy for him. And I just wanted to let you know that he passed away over the winter and what a difference you made in his life. So, George, I just went in my car and I cried for the better part of 20 minutes. And I could not catch my breath. It was so, of course, emotional, but what it taught me is the power of human interaction. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the importance of looking people in the eyes, making a connection. So when I'm doing a school show, I tell the kids they have a superpower. You can't fly like Superman. You can't lift boulders like the Hulk, but you can make a person smile. How? By looking them in the eyeballs, by complimenting them, by remembering someone's name that you met weeks earlier, by being a respectful person. And I say, you don't know what type of day a person is having, but your power is you can make another human being's day better and brighter with a smile. So if you walk past someone and you don't look them in the eyeballs and acknowledge them, at least with your eyes, if not with your words, then you're missing a really important opportunity. So that was the summer of '01. And over the past 16, 17 years, it has been my pleasure and my honor to drive up to Camp Simcha every summer and give them a couple of freebie Simon Sez shows. And I'm very proud of the fact that my boys have sort of followed suit. My older son was a swimmer in high school, and he took that passion. And what I would say to people is, if you have a passion, use it towards a charity. It costs you absolutely nothing because it's a passion of yours, so you enjoy doing it. Giving of your time, giving of charity, and should not be a hardship. It should not be something that should be a chore or a job. You should enjoy doing it. So my son ended up swimming. We have no one in our family affected by multiple sclerosis, but my son ended up swimming across the Hudson River with the MS Society for many years and raised thousands and thousands of dollars. He started when he was 8 years old doing that. My younger boy, not only did he swim a couple of times, but he found a homeless shelter in downtown White Plains where we live. And once a month they would organize birthday parties for all the kids that had a birthday that month. And they have a big one-day birthday party. And my son was taking a page out of his old man's notebook, and he was making balloon animals at the birthday parties, giving of his time for these kids who really don't have a lot doing that. And I also should mention that my wife, bless her heart, came down with a nasty case of the breast cancer 6 years ago, went through a double mastectomy, but came out on the other side just stronger than ever. And she has done the New York City Triathlon the past 3 years through a charity. You can do it on your own. You can give, I think, $400 to be a member of the New York City Triathlon. But there's also back doors, ways of doing it through charities. And the New York City Triathlon offers you a plethora of worthy charities that you can go to. And she found a charity that helps women going through breast and ovarian cancer. And she's raised, over the past 3 years, over $15,000 for that charity. So how rewarding is that to see my wife go through something so awful, but then have it turn into something so positive? I would say my charity of choice is anything having to do with cancer, and the hope that one day no one will ever have to worry about getting cancer again, hopefully in my lifetime. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
It would be wonderful. And I love those charitable causes. I see that you've got a great big heart, and it's one of the things that I really always want our listeners to hear. I'm probably going to say this a million times over. We learn how to contribute so we can make a living, but then we just go out there and give all that we can. And it sounds like you guys are giving a lot. And I really appreciate the time that you have given to this podcast and really look forward to airing this.
Well, George, it's my pleasure. I was happily surprised when you reached out to me. You are the first person to have reached out to me for a podcast. And I was just, overjoyed to get your initial email and to know that you and your children, your boys. You have 2 boys. Is that what it is?
2 boys and 2 girls. The girls weren't there.
Okay. That they enjoyed the show and you enjoyed the show. That's why I do what I do. When people stop enjoying my show, that's when I stop playing Simon Sez. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a guest on your show.
Thank you. Everybody else, thank you for listening. We hoped you enjoyed the interview and found useful ideas about things you can do with your kids. Be sure to check the show notes at www.choosethenickel.com for links to names, books, and other resources we discussed in today's show. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter and visit our contact page where you can give us feedback. We invite you to share Choose the Nickel with your friends and join us in our quest to give kids financial freedom.